Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalaran, and patch 9.2 is nowhere near us. In fact, a lot of us are waiting for potentially an announcement of a blue post, maybe a patch 9.1 PTR, but we're not going to be seeing a patch 9.2 anytime soon. That hasn't stopped any of the World of Warcraft players from coming up with their own theories of what the patch could be. Some wishes of what they personally would want to see, but also some of the systems that sound quite interesting. Today we got 3 fan theories to take a look at. Some of the things that players believe that potentially could become a real deal in the patch 9.2. None of these are confirmation of what the future patches hold, but these are simply fun to explore the what if aspect. A lot of these are just wishful thinking of fans of the content. And these 3 theories in particular are significant because these are the ones I keep hearing about all the time. Whether it is reading forum posts or comments on other websites or from the chat itself whenever we live stream. The first fan theory is the one that I heard quite a lot about, and that is potentially what if we got Artifact Weapons 2.0 in patch 9.2. Except instead of getting these weapons that belong to certain iconic heroes of World of Warcraft or even villains, instead we forged these weapons with the help of the Rune Carver, otherwise known as Primus himself. Primus wields domination magic. In terms of runes and carvings and crafting our legendaries, he was actually the one who helped us craft those before he regained his memories. But before that, playing through the Necrolord area of Maldraxxus, you get to learn some of the teachings of Primus himself, as he installed that teaching to everybody residing in Maldraxxus, every one of the Necrolords. You mostly have things that has to do with war and battle, from the strategic minds of being able to outmaneuver your enemy, through the battles and the carnage, and just being able to throw as many warriors as possible, even those stitched in abomination for unholy strength. Even the assassins with the spider dudes hanging around in the dark and the stealth, assassinating key targets and collecting secrets, as well as building the most powerful weapons with different forgers. Very similar to what Bonesmith Earmere is if you play the Necrolord Covenant. Forging a weapon, particularly a rune blade, is actually how you start off the Necrolord part of the leveling in Shadowlands. And that domination magic and the forging also what inspired Mournblade, the weapon that Anduin currently wields. It has the etched runes just like Frostmourne does, and I would imagine also steals souls as well. With us taking on the Jailer in future patches, maybe, we don't really know. Is he actually going to be the bad guy at the end, or is it going to be somebody else and Jailer will be saved for another expansion? But either way, it wouldn't be out of the ordinary for the Primus to want to outfit us with as much power as he can grant us in order to help us along our journey. For us, maybe potentially crafting a weapon with the powers of the Primus is not completely out of the realm of possibility. And that's where the fan theory of the Mournblade comes from. Except with different Mournblades, it wouldn't all be just one-handed swords. For rogues, you could have the daggers, hunters, you can have the spears and the bows, other types of weapons for other kinds of casters, like staffs, shields, you name it. And of course, it would be implied that what if it had the same trade paths to follow as an artifact weapon? Maybe not as expansive because, you know, it will be something that will be given us for a patch until the end of the expansion potentially, like an extra system added to the content. So I would imagine it won't be as expansive and as huge as the artifact weapon system, but what if it had traits of its own and active abilities for our class specs, very similar to what artifact weapon abilities did? Basically, imagine all the cool parts of the artifact weapon system minus the grindy aspect potentially, or the annoying aspect, and maybe some really cool cosmetics like the Legion Mage Tower challenge and different reskins had back in the day. It's also implied that maybe once the Jailer reaches the sepulcher of the first ones, what if inside of the sepulcher there are souls that he will use maybe as anima of sorts to power some kind of a grand scheme of his, and these Mournblades, very similar to the Frostmourne, would be able to steal or at least release souls, which would depower the Jailer or whatever he's trying to do. While this isn't anything confirmed, I think it's pretty likely it could be kind of cool. I think it would be different because a lot of us are expecting for our characters to grow in very obvious ways. Maybe some more soulbind additions, maybe a second legendary for us to run together with tier sets. But what if instead of like one of those things, instead of expanding the soulbinds, instead we get to craft our own custom weapons and empower them and allow these weapons to maybe change form based on spec. Again, I talked about what if they removed some of the annoying parts of the artifact weapon, and while the system was really cool, having to get AP for every single spec was pretty annoying. So what if these weapons formed based on the spec that you ran? Something cool like that. I love the artifact weapon thing, and I enjoyed it a lot in Legion, and if Blizzard tried it again, I think it could be interesting. As long as the grindy aspect of it isn't super heavy, I think the customization of it, as well as potentially powers that your classes could unlock in the future, could be interesting, at least how I imagine them. So I'm actually not against the idea whatsoever. The second would be a little bit of lore in terms of where could the lore go forward, and kind of where could it complete. Now, the one theory that I've been hearing quite a bit when it comes to the lore, and that has to do with the jailer, the Azeroth itself, and that sword that's been sticking out of Azeroth since Legion, was there the whole time in BFA, and what if that sword will actually play a part going into Shadowlands? So the theory goes as such. The sword model for Sargeras' sword has been found in Korthia. Korthia is a place of secrets, and while the sword model is just a sword model that most likely was just added in for fun because it looked really cool, and it's a very similar model if you've ever done the Night Fae starter campaign. When you first join the Covenant, you get to do a play with the Fae, and in that play you get to wield the sword that you get to stab into Azeroth. So is it unlikely that someone who was tasked with decorating one of the areas of Korthia, maybe one of those libraries or a secret area, and they were just throwing in a bunch of different decorations like chairs, scrolls, let's just put a sword because it looks really cool? I guess it's very possible. There's just a random item that was chosen by somebody just for the sake of adding something to have in the scene when you're exploring Korthia. While that is very likely, and usually Alchem's Razor points to the most easiest explanation is the right one, what if they put it there on purpose? Korthia is a place of secrets, and maybe what if there are some things in Korthia, whisperings or certain items that actually tell a tale of where the game is going to go forward? Just something we don't have really much connection to right now, but it will be explained in the future. And what if the sword is the same sword in Azeroth and is meant to play some sort of a part going forward in the expansion? I don't know if you follow the story of World of Warcraft, but the general gist right now is Zoval, or the jailer, was the original arbiter of the Shadowlands until he decided to kind of unmake everything, and then he was cast down into the maw, imprisoned by his brothers and sisters. Now that he has regained his full power and a sweet set of armor, he is off to just wreak havoc upon the world, and what the Primus describes will be next is death comes for the soul of your world. If you played Legion, you actually fought a world soul of Argus, which was one a really cool fight. I was a huge fan of how they did it. Second, I found that fight pretty difficult on Mythic at the time with my guild, so it was my very first cutting edge fight. But third, it also just kind of added a little bit of lore to World of Warcraft, like the worlds themselves have souls. So if Argus has a soul, so does Azeroth. In fact, Azeroth does have a soul, but we haven't seen it, but we watched it bleed a lot. We tried to help it in Battle for Azeroth, collecting anima, mostly either through doing islands or dailies. But if Zoval is going after the world soul of Azeroth, potentially Azeroth would have to fight. And the actual world souls themselves are not tiny either. They're pretty massive. They're pretty big. What if towards the end of the expansion, somehow, some way, it ended with Zoval fighting versus Azeroth, and Azeroth World Soul were to pick up the sword out of its core and use the sword as a weapon against the jailer? It's a cool theory and will solve a couple things. One, the sword eventually gotta go. It can't just sit in Silithus the whole time. Eventually something's gotta change because the sword has just been there just for a whole expansion. Two, I think thematically it would be a really cool fight, watching these two massive titans, the jailer himself and Azeroth, combating each other in like a raid format. I can only imagine just the kind of visual aesthetics that developers could probably do with it. And third, I just like the idea of the grand scale of it all. Zoval fighting the world soul of Azeroth. To me, the idea is fun, but I am not a lore person. So from my perspective, I'm just looking at what would be a really cool thing to watch, what would be entertaining to witness, not really in terms of what makes sense in terms of the lore. And there are a lot of people that care about the lore of World of Warcraft and for it to make sense. So this idea might actually just be completely out of left field, but I personally thought it would be really cool. Also, if you've ever done the brand new mega dungeon of Tezavesh, you totally should. The gear from it is pretty good. The looks for that gear is fantastic. Some of the trinkets in there are actually good, and the fights are pretty fun. But if you go through Tezavesh, you'll actually find some secrets inside of the dungeon. The first one would be the fact that Galawix is back on the playing field. Some way, somehow, Galawix, after Battle for Azeroth, is returned. You can actually find him in one of the bars of Tezavesh talking to a bunch of brokers, mostly from the Cartel Ba and Cartel Al. There's even a link with the cartels themselves, the brokers, and the first ones, as during the dungeon, you actually, for the second half of that dungeon, are chasing after brokers that are trying to find the secrets and maybe even make their way to the sepulcher. One of them even uses an artifact of the first ones during your fight. So the brokers are very interested in the secrets of the first ones. So it's not just us and the jailer, it looks like brokers are almost like a third faction looking for stuff as well. Gallowix, together with all his schemes, working together with the brokers who are always making deals inside of this world that's not even Azeroth and can span even Cosmos. I mean, where do brokers even come from? I feel like they're setting up for potentially maybe a zone of sorts, maybe a brand new dungeon, maybe like a side raid, because I think that would be really cool if there was some sort of a literal encounter, like a 3-boss raid, kind of like a mid-tier fight. This doesn't address the length of Shadowlands. We don't really know how long Shadowlands is. Some players speculate that after patch 9.2, we're going to go into patch 10.0. Some players thought that 9.1 was going to be the last patch and we'll just move on to the next expansion. So this doesn't address the length of the expansion whatsoever, so keep that in mind. I'm just stating that putting together these two forces, the ingenuity of goblins, as well as the mysteriousness of the brokers themselves, you could have a lot of cool things come together. I mean, what if a 9.2 patch was very similar to Battle for Azeroth 8.2, where we got Nazjatar, which had the main story of the Naga and Ajara, which eventually led to Nazoth, but you also had the side content of the Mechanomes. What if in the next patch you got Sepulcher, where the jailer is heading off to and you're discovering the main story, while also you have some side stuff with more brokers and goblins? I personally would be excited about it. I think it'd be cool if they added like a zone where brokers come from with more history and background for them, because I actually really enjoy them. They're very mysterious. There's very little written about them. There's very little in game that tells them exactly where they come from, and I think it'd be really cool to explore that facet of the game. But those are the 3 theories that we have so far, or at least those are the most popular ones. There's a lot of different theories and quote-unquote leaks that are coming out where players, it's usually not really a leak. It usually comes down to wishful thinking by the players, something that are hoping that might eventually become content at some point or another in World of Warcraft. And I'm a huge fan of stuff like this. I'm a huge fan of reading a bunch of different theories, a bunch of different ideas, where these ideas could eventually become or what they potentially could be at some point or another. I'm a huge fan of that stuff and I wanted to talk about it in this video, so I do hope you guys enjoyed. You let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think any of these ideas at all could potentially be set up for patch 9.2? Or if you have your own ideas of what you think 9.2 potentially could have, if we are even going to have a 9.2, let me know in the comments below, or hit me up on Discord if you got your own theories. Share it with everybody else on the channel. Discord link down in the description as always. But thank you guys so much for checking out this video. I do hope you guys enjoyed. You let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and as always, I'll see all of you guys in another video.